Miscoll, and welcome to this edition of the Eric Miscoll Show. Before we get into the show today, let me do a little housekeeping for our audience. The show will last about 45 minutes today. We'll try to respect the time frame here. This is being recorded and will be rebroadcasted probably Monday of next week on EMS Now. And if you have any questions for our audience, we encourage you to pose them using the question tab or button on the bottom of your screen there, and we will do our best to pull those in as well. Welcome as always to my co-host, Phil Stoughton, joining us from Melbourne, Australia again. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you.
Today's topic is the EMS industry in North America. And to discuss this, we invited two gentlemen who work with two of the larger EMS headquartered in North America. Joining us today, we have Rob Crawford. He's the Chief Revenue Officer with Benchmark Electronics, and David Longshore, who's the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer with Creation Technologies. They both wave, but you also see their logos clearly behind them. So there won't be any confusion here today. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to join and have a conversation with us today. As always, I'd like to begin by allowing each of you to introduce yourself and your organizations for the benefit of the audience. And Rob, why don't I begin with you?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Rob Crawford. I'm with Benchmark. We're about a $2 billion manufacturing company, and we're a global company. So we've got although we're talking primarily about North America today, we're a global company. We've got manufacturing sites all around the world. Focus a lot on, kind of beyond just manufacturing. We do a lot of engineering work for our customers. We do a lot of work in some specialized areas like microelectronics as well. I've been with the company for a couple of years. I joined the company shortly after Jeff Bank joined. Jeff became the new CEO 2 years ago. Jeff and I work together. Most of my background actually is on the OEM side, so I'm really not, a career EMS guy. I spent most of my career on the OEM side of the industry, and both Jeff and I kind of come with a bit of that customer perspective, probably to Benchmark, and that's one of the things that we're really focused on, is making sure we support our customers well. So
excellent, thank you, sir. David.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for having me. My name is David Longshore. I'm the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for Creation Technologies. Creation Technologies is a mid-tier EMS company founded in North America in 1991. We closed our 2020 numbers just over 600 million in revenue, and we focus mostly on the high complexity, low to medium volume, high mix type product. And typically we find that in three key markets in North America: the tech industrial, military aerospace, and medical.
Okay, excellent. Before we get into kind of some of the back and forth, we always want to check about, the event that we've all been living through and continue to live through here. Hopefully we'll put it in the rear view mirror. And that is the COVID pandemic. It's about a year ago at Apex when it all seemed to start, at least that's how I time it. When we were at that show, it started happening, and then it moved fast and furious since. So I'd like to ask is kind of, what was the impact on your operations, and how are things today? And Rob, coming back to you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy year, right? I mean, it's I think the number one priority we've kind of maintained through the whole year is just trying to keep our people safe. That's been a number one thing. For a lot of us, that meant we worked remotely, home office and remote work, just to reduce exposure. But, we're a manufacturing company. We have a lot of people that come to our sites and work every day. So we did a lot with testing and screening, and did a lot of things to just make sure we kept people safe. I think the second thing we were really focused on is making sure we could maintain our commitments to our customers. So if you think about local restrictions and other things that we've managed through the year, we've had additional spacing, additional protocols in terms of people's safety, and at the end of the day, that does impact your ability to manufacture a product. And so that piece became something that I think my hat's off to our team. We did a great job this year of really maintaining all of our commitments with customers and making sure that we we're able to execute according to their expectations in terms of deliveries. I do think, the funny thing is that, I'm in the sales side. I think David's on the sales side as well. That became a new dynamic. How do you engage with customers? Because, a lot of what we do involves having our customers come and visit our facilities, having our customers meet our leadership team, those kinds of things. And when you're restricted from that, we had to really adapt. And I think, what we found, it's kind of interesting. We've been doing a lot with just virtual tours where we're able to give tours of our facilities, give customers the feeling of being on site in our facilities. But we're doing that all online. So it's either Zoom or Teams meetings or, other ways to still have that same kind of meaningful engagement where customers can get the same experience that they would have face to face, but doing it all virtually. And, the amazing thing is through the year, we've maintained a lot of momentum. Our business growth and bookings and new customer engagements, I think this is one of the best years we've had. So it's been interesting to try and keep that part of it going as well as the execution part of it. I think it's impacted both sides.
Yeah, interesting. David, how's it been at Creation Tech?
Yeah, I would echo what Rob says. It really came down to two priorities: protecting our people and servicing our customers. And salespeople definitely had to adapt. If I think back towards it, I kind of think of it in three phases, to be honest, Eric. The first phase was just how do you protect your people, figuring that out and servicing the customers, right? So everything from, how do you get enough mask in to keep people, with mask? How do you test people inside your facility? How do you, create a workspace that's got the social distance, right? Especially, when we're in an industry that sometimes measures us by revenue by square foot, right? So all of those type of things, how did you create this new normal workspace? And at the same time, how do you make sure you're servicing your customers with their critical needs, right? We definitely felt it first in our facilities in China. But what we appreciated about that was there were very clear guidelines on how to get open again. And so our facility hit all of those guidelines, opened very quickly. 70% of the team members back within a few hours, and we were up and running, meeting customers' demand again. If I think about North America, we've got 9 locations in North America. And from a business continuity perspective, that's great. From dealing with a global pandemic that nobody's led through before, 9 different locations in 9 different states or provinces means you get 9 different ways of handling it. And so, probably the most challenging one was Mexico. Our facility got closed, wasn't real clear guidelines on what was required to get it open, but we worked with the local government in a timely manner. We were able to get it back open. And so that was kind of that first phase of just how do we keep our people safe? How do we keep our facilities open? How do we work with our customers to identify the essential product? And I think largely, I think of that as Q2 and Q3 of last year. Mm-hmm. As we shifted into kind of Q4, it felt like we went into a different phase. Our team members got used to the new work environment. They got used to how do they handle kids learning from home. And COVID, what I would call COVID fatigue set in, right? All of a sudden, we saw more customers that wanted to come visit, more suppliers that wanted to come into our building. And we really had to focus on protecting our people as that COVID fatigue set in. We took it to the point where we were actually sending care packages home to remind them that, we might have all the right things while you're at the workforce, but especially as we came towards the holiday seasons, and we had the luxury of seeing the Canadian Thanksgiving before US and watching what happened there with a spike in cases shortly after, trying to prevent that from our US locations. And so phase 2 was really how do you deal with COVID fatigue and how do you continue to service customers? And I think right now we're in what I would consider phase 3, right? As vaccines and the number of vaccines being deployed per day continue to increase, how do we encourage our team members to take advantage of that? How do we realize what the new normal is going to be? I don't think it'll ever get back to what it was pre-COVID. Rob brought up a great point about virtual tours. I think pre-COVID, if we had mentioned to a potential customer, we'll just audit our facility virtually over Zoom and sign off on it. They probably would have laughed at us and we would have no longer been in the running for that opportunity. Now it's regularly accepted. It's the norm. And so we're in that, what does the vaccination look like? What does the new interaction with our customers look like? And I think all companies are probably reevaluating, do I really need that much in my T&E budget? Can I not be just as effective without it? So that's how we've seen. From a sales cycle perspective, we did watch our sales cycle elongate a little bit, right? What may have taken normally 9 months to close, all of a sudden started to take 12 or 15 months because customers had other things to focus on, right? They were facing the same challenges that we were. And then I think new opportunities into the funnel early last year slowed down. If customers were thinking about changing from one provider to the next, all of a sudden they had higher priorities to think about. And so that got delayed until the second half of the year. But now we see that funnel activity increasing and a very robust outlook.
Yeah. Hey, David and Rob, I'm really interested when you talk about, particularly on the sales and marketing side, the way you've adapted and adjusted. Are there things that you think as a result of COVID, you've actually been able to do better? And when things do return and you are able to spend more of your time in airports and on airplanes, will you take some lessons from it and kind of streamline some of those processes?
Rob,
you're on
So
mute.
got it. I had my dog in here a minute ago, so I'm trying to multitask a little bit here. But David made the point, are we going to go back to where we were? And I think it's a real legitimate question. We look at marketing as an example, trade shows. All the trade shows have essentially become virtual. So we look at money we used to spend a certain way to outreach to customers and develop awareness. And we're pulling back on a lot of that stuff to reflect what I think is going to be a new normal. And I think we're finding that we're still being effective. I think it's interesting. I find it easier to get people on a Zoom meeting than it was a lot of times to get a face-to-face meeting, because calendars become a little more open when you don't have to deal with airplanes and airports and rental cars. And so we've found in a lot of ways we're probably more productive. And I think, whereas we may only meet with a couple people at a customer or allow them to come visit our site, if I do that virtually, I can have 10 or 12 people participate in something like that. So I do think in some ways we're better than we were. There's never going to be a replacement for face-to-face. And if your customer, if you're in the customer's chair, you're always going to want to have a face-to-face view of the manufacturing facilities and, understand more in a face-to-face relationship who you're working with. But I think that's going to remain balanced in a way that's different than where it was before this all hit a year ago. So I do think there's going to be a new normal, and I don't know that it's all bad.
No, I agree. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think our marketing team has definitely had to get creative, right? The expectation for leads didn't change. So, how do they drive more activity and drive more leads? I think there was a period where our team had to shift from how am I just as effective virtual as I was face-to-face, right? And so there was a little bit of a learning curve there, right? We quickly forced our team, you're on, you got to have the camera turned on, right? You can't be multitasking while you're on the call like you normally would be. You've got to be able to still make that eye contact. But I do agree with Rob, right? Building that credibility when your customer wants to meet the leadership team and wants to look, sit across the table, look somebody in the eye and hear that commitment. I think that's still, that will come back. And again, I agree. I don't think we'll get back to the travel of, 75, 80% of your time like it used to be. But I think it will slowly return.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fascinating, isn't it? I've probably got 6 or 7 Zoom meetings today, and I'll meet and talk to people that are in maybe 5 different countries. I'll do the US this morning, I'll do Europe this evening. You can't do that any other way. And I think people are adjusting and getting used to it. And for me, the pinnacle is appearing on the Eric Miscoll Show. I didn't get to do that every 2 weeks before without flying all the way to Texas. Now I get to do it via Zoom. So I appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome. But listen, you both bring an interesting point. Since you're kind of at that engagement with the OEMs, I'm curious how, and you're talking about how OEMs are adjusting, they're going through the same challenges in their own lives, right, with this, and maybe being a little more patient. But, the big issues last year when we talked to EMS was the whole, digitalization and automation were some of the big trends that were increased in the process. So how are the OEM's expectations, or have they changed at all in the last year relative to the service side of the EMS industry? Rob, maybe come to you.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we've seen certainly is that there's there's, you know, just take it by sector a little bit. It's kind of interesting, just the impact of how these things have gone by sector, but in medical in particular, you know, you see a lot more interest in devices that are, you know, at the patient. You know, you don't have to go into a treatment center to use that device. So, you know, things that need to be connected in a way that represent kind of the new usage model where people are more remote. They're not coming to centralized facilities as much. We see that as a really pronounced, you know, development in the medical market in particular. You know, it's interesting to look at similarly in the industrial market for us, which is a high growth market for us. You've got a lot of need for connected devices because you've got maybe fewer people, and so factory automation. You've got things that are changing. Connectivity wise, 5G becomes more relevant as people become more distributed and need better connectivity. So there's parts of the markets that we see that probably have taken a different trajectory over the last year, just and maybe, you know, maybe, you know, certain aspects of how they operate and how they connect and communicate have become more prominent. And I think, you know, in terms of how we build things, you know, automation has become an increasing part of how we you know, how we do manufacturing work. And you know, some of that you could say is related to the pandemic, right? If I have trouble getting you know, people into a site to do manufacturing work, automation allows me to maintain my operation without worrying about you know, people being impacted, that kind of thing. So I do think it's, you know, we're seeing a few things that have accelerated as a result of what's gone on in the world over the last year. And connectivity, probably as much as anything, has probably become more important.
No. David, how do you see it with manufacturing you guys do?
Yeah, so again, I'll hit the markets as well first. I think it's, you know, IoT used to be thought of as its own subsegment. It really isn't anymore. It's an added feature, and it's no longer an added feature that's a competitive advantage. It's kind of table stakes, right? And while you may expect that in the medical space, you know, I think now, you know, as Rob was saying, in the industrial space, it's table stakes there as well now, right? It's expected that we're able to help our customers implement that as they're thinking about new designs. Within our facilities as well, you know, I think there's a place for automation. Well, actually, let me hit digitalization first within our facilities. I think it's also raised the customer's expectations within our facilities. All right, a few years ago, if you had a product that tested outside its limits, you know, that was fine. You worked on it. You figured out what the next steps were. Now, with the fact that you know, you're expected to have that data readily available at your fingertips, it's no longer acceptable that it's failed. It's expected that, you know, wait a minute, it started to drift towards an upper or lower control limit. That should have been identified then. Corrective action should have been placed long before the first unit ever failed. So I think the expectations from OEMs on the EMS partner taking and having the data and turning it into actionable information that allows a lower cost solution to them continues to increase. From automation within our factory, I think there's a place for it. Again, you know, we're more on the low to medium volume, high mix, high complexity. So, you know, we don't have a line that we're going to set up and we're going to run the same product for the next 10 days straight. So while we may not necessarily see the ROI for us or our customers in some of the automation of those steps, we definitely see it on some of the front end steps, you know, just how you're storing components, how you're picking for the next kit. That's, you know, those repeatable tasks that you're doing over and over again. Automation is a great way to take cost out and airproof it.
Yeah. Hey, I'm curious with respect to OEM's expectations and that digital transformation. Are they asking for more transparency? Are they asking for more visibility into your supply chain? Because obviously supply chain agility, supply chain resilience is a big thing. Do they want a digital path directly in there? David, perhaps you can take that from Creation Tech's point of view first.
Yeah, so, you know, we have a customer portal. Our customers are able to log on. They're able to see the factory flow of all of their product. You know, it starts with supply chain, so they can see every bit of the supply chain they've placed on us, right down to the individual components, how many parts we have on hand, how many we have on order, when is that kit going to be clear. From then, when it goes to the factory floor, they can see the product through the entire factory, right? Every single step, when it was, you know, scanned, So if the customer thinks they're getting 100 units tomorrow and it's not gotten to a far enough stage, they could absolutely call us and question that. And then, naturally the logistics portion, they expect to be able to see live as well. When is it shipped? Where's it at? Who signed for it? What we typically see is early in the engagement, usage of it is very high, right? Customers are logged in, they're following the flow of the product. They like being able to pick up the call and say, or pick up the phone and call us and say, hey, I see, X many of them just got scanned at AOI. Are we on track? Same thing from a supply chain perspective, we see them heavily involved. In good times, that wanes, right? That they realize, okay, it's kind of on autopilot. I can let go of it. What I would say with the current supply chain, we probably see more usage of the portal, looking at the supply chain, asking how can we help than we probably did a few months ago. So I think that transparency, the expectation from OEMs on transparency has also increased.
Yeah, and I would say expectations overall have increased, right? So, it's amazing when you think about our business and how much of our customers, workload is shifted to us, right? And how dependent they are on making sure that we execute like we're supposed to. And that transparency is an important part of that. You got to, this idea of trust and integrity and making sure you have open communication with customers is really important. But their expectations have gone up. It's not just continuity of supply. It's looking forward. What are you doing proactively to make sure, especially in, we're in an environment right now where some components are looking at extended lead times. That planning and forecasting is harder than it used to be. You've also got a time when there's a lot of volatility, right? So with everything that's going on, you've got markets that are either increasing or decreasing depending on how the pandemic's impacted them. That volatility causes the supply chain to jump around. So their expectations, I think, are higher than maybe where they were a few years ago, in that, they really want us to be more proactive. They want us to, be, evaluating risk in the future for them as a big part of how we provide value as a manufacturing partner. So that's one of the things that I think we've seen up level a lot over the past year.
Yeah, expectations continue to, anytime you have one of these discussions, expectations are higher than they were last year, and they're probably going to be higher next year. And that's kind of the way of the world in the EMS industry. Deliver more, charge me less is the OEM mantra. But I guess the same pressure is on them from their consumers and their end customers as well. But that segues neatly into what Eric was keen to ask about the current challenges in the material supply chain. There's a lot going on there, and there's a lot to unpack with semiconductors. How's that impacting, David?
Yeah, so from a supply chain perspective, I would say it feels like on January 1st, somebody trying to treadmill all the way to full speed and said, hop on, right?
Yeah.
I think we saw the perfect storm where distributors and suppliers were protecting their balance sheet by leaning out their on-hand inventory as they entered the second half of last year. At the same time, consumer product laptops for all the children going to learning at home went through the roof. Consumer product around anything healthcare that people were taking into their house went through the roof. And then the automotive industry rebounded pretty quick. And I think we all know, every vehicle today uses exponentially more components than it did a decade ago. So at the same time, you've got a supply chain leaning itself out. All of a sudden, you've got this rapid demand increase. And, I've worked in distribution and in EMS, so I've had the pleasure of seeing several cycles of over inventoried supply chains and supply chains on constraint and allocation. What I would say is this is a unique one like I haven't seen before. We've got suppliers saying the only way we're going to commit capacity to you is if you give us 12 months non-cancelable, non-reschedulable, non-returnable orders. But even then, we're not going to commit capacity, pricing, or delivery to you. We've got other suppliers saying, your rolling 20 weeks is non-cancelable, non-returnable, non-reschedulable. And so that's been pretty unique. Those are things different than the allocations that I've seen in previous cycles. At Creation, we're pretty fortunate that we've been working with customers quite a while on VAVE, not just how do you take cost out of the bill of materials, but how do you reduce risk by expanding your AVL. And again, you'll never get any bill of materials to zero single source components, but trust me, it's having a big impact now for our customers. And while the additional AVLs may not be at the same price, what we're hearing from our customers is they would much rather pay a small increase than not be able to ship product to their end customers and potentially lose market share. So that's helped us prior to this period of time. What we're doing during this period of time, though, is very in-depth conversations with every single one of our customers. It says, here's how far out we have visibility. Here's how many parts on your active bill of materials have lead times greater than that. We've either got to increase visibility to make sure that we're getting that to the supply chain, or we've got to work on it collaboratively on a different strategy for those individual components. And if we don't, here's where we believe you're putting your own revenue at jeopardy. It's not about our revenue, it's about our customers being able to maintain their revenue and not lose market share. And when you have conversations that are focused on that, you have different level of supply chain collaboration. So that's what we're seeing. I don't think it's going to get better in the next couple of quarters from what I'm seeing. So great time for those supply chain professionals to really shine.
Yeah, I do think it's almost like it's a bit of a perfect storm right now with constrained materials a little bit in a lot of key areas. You've also got a lot of volatility on the demand side. And so, David made the point around forecasting and the importance of forecasting. It's at a time where a lot of our customers are having trouble forecasting their business accurately right now. And you've got in medical as a good example, where you've got some medical solutions that are seeing, dramatically increased demand. You've got some stuff that's fallen off, right? So stuff that's more elective or trauma related, we're seeing kind of a softening in demand on those things. Aerospace is similar, right? You got commercial aerospace that is a really uncertain market right now, and demand, has taken a real change downward. But at a time where you've got constrained materials, the one thing you really want to have is a good understanding of your demand, and so you can get ahead of long lead time items. You can get the forecasts in place, and it's a time when that's extremely difficult for a lot of our customers right now. So you're kind of trying to balance both sides of understanding demand and making sure that you've got material planning that's well thought out to support that demand, and then accommodating fluctuations as they happen, because that's inevitable. So I think it is a really difficult time right now for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and it's challenging the fact that a lot of the shortages are semiconductors, and you don't stand up a new semiconductor facility in a few days or a few weeks. Right. That's a year-long billion-dollar process to kind of make that correction. Are people prepared to consider design change, or maybe redesign of a printed circuit board to take out a component that's got very, very long lead time?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we see a lot of, actually. So benchmark engineering is a big part of the value we bring to customers. To David's point, a lot of times that value comes in, finding alternates for an AVL, finding component solutions, redesign for improved manufacturability. A lot of the things that rather than just try to solve it with brute force supply chain effort, a lot of times it's an easier conversation to do an assessment of the design, look for alternate components that maybe provide the same functionality, potentially lower cost, and then alleviate a supply problem that way. But there's always that cycle you've got to go through, where you go through verification, you go through, there's all the things that need to happen as part of adjusting the AVL. Something thankfully we've got a lot of experience with at Benchmark. So it's one of the key ways we're helping our customers right now.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a question that actually plays off of one of the ones we were going to ask anyway, which had to do with the whole issue of reshoring, right, during this last year and what's going on. So what are you seeing in terms of reshoring of business back to North America, or more regionalization? Reshoring to me always has a political connotation, right? Whereas regionalization, build in region for region, seems to be a sensible strategy, right? At least in my mind. So what are you seeing there, and in terms of that? So Rob, go ahead. You were talking. Let you continue there.
Yeah. I mean, so we've seen a heck of a lot of interest, and we touch a lot of these highly regulated markets. That's part of what we do, right? So if it's in the aerospace world, or if it's in the medical world, a lot of those customers feel more comfortable with local manufacturing options. And the fact that we've got as many options in North America as we do is a benefit. And a lot of times they like having manufacturing close to engineering as well. And if we're partnered in the engineering world, a lot of our engineers, we have a global team, but a lot of our engineers, in areas like medical are based here in the US. So that's that alignment between, regulations for, certifications for facilities that are appropriate given regulated markets. Proximity to engineering is another thing. Obviously, tariffs are driving a big part of this. So in a lot of the, the markets that are impacted by tariffs, we're seeing a lot of people right now that are interested in moving into regions where they have, less harsh tariff implications based on how they manufacture their products. So that's causing a lot of conversations, for people that are looking at options outside specifically China right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of interest in regions like Mexico or other parts of North America. So I think it's a matter of the markets we touch, number one, that drive a lot of interest given the regulation. It's the proximity to engineering, which we tend to have that either in Europe or the Americas, depending on which customers we're talking about. And then it's this idea of getting around the tariffs and making sure that they don't penalize themselves unduly on tariffs as they build out an operation strategy. So those things are all driving a heck of a lot of, it's a lot of conversations with customers right now around those specific topics.
Yeah. Hey, David, I'm reminded, I remember years ago seeing a map of creation technology, where your facilities were and where the customers were located. And it was kind of these tight clusters all over. So how's the impact on reshoring been for you?
Yeah, I would say I would echo what Rob said. Right, I think reshoring is a phrase that's been around for a while. I think tariffs was the tipping point that really caused it to get momentum. As customers started looking at their total cost of landed or their total landed cost of ownership to their end customer, with the tariffs, that changed the game. We've seen a huge demand for Mexico. We've actually broke ground on a new facility in Hermosillo that we'll be cutting the ribbon on later this year because of that demand, right? And I think, a lot of it depends on the markets as well. Again, we focus on that low to medium volume, high complexity. And if the end market is in North America, it is quite often makes sense to be built in North America. Again, the markets we focus in, medical, aerospace, defense, tech, industrial, when we're talking with those COOs, CTOs, and they're talking about their product roadmap, they're not talking China anymore, right? The default is, okay, let's get it launched local, keep engineering close, but when it gets to a stable volume with a stable design, let's get it to Mexico. So I think we've got traction today with product coming back. But as the next generations of the product roadmaps get released, I think we'll see the real momentum on that.
Yeah. Listen, the other question that was posed, and I think it was an interesting one, is are you seeing any trends in customers taking electronics manufacturing back in-house, that insourcing trend during this last year? Have you any examples of that? Have either of you gentlemen seen any of that? I've
actually seen the opposite. Right. What we have seen is OEMs that, smaller in size, 1, 2, 3 SMT lines in their facility, doing their final integration, as they were impacted by COVID and maybe couldn't produce product for several weeks and ship to their customers, they started to reevaluate that fixed cost versus variable cost model. And I think it caused them to also look and say, okay, that's a lot of overhead on a weekly basis that could be sitting idle. And is it truly our core competency, right? Are my end customers buying my product because I manufacture it myself? Or are they buying it for the capabilities and competitive advantage of that? So we have several instances now because of COVID that's opened those kind of conversations. And again, some of them are very close to our facilities of, can you absorb part of our workforce into your facility? Can you open up the floor space? I no longer want to run my own SMT lines. And some of them are all the way at the other end of the spectrum of, can you take over our facility? So from what we've seen, Eric, it's kind of the opposite. It's not the desire to let me bring back in more, It's okay, let me go to a more of a variable cost model because it'll protect me during times like this.
Yeah, and
What do you
it
think?
speaks to the volatility, doesn't it? It speaks to volatility that they want something that's much more flexible than having their own facility.
Yeah, I
Rob?
think that's right, Phil. I think, kind of to the point is that, this volatility, so we've had a lot of customers that in the past year have had trouble if they are insourced with capacity because, ventilators are, kind of your typical example, but, companies that were making ventilators all of a sudden needed to find excess capacity beyond their walls, and once that starts, they start to assess, David made a good point around kind of what's core, what's not core. And, a lot of customers are really in this time trying to assess how they are spending their money, where their capital's assigned, and how, what is really core that makes them more competitive in their markets. And they're finding that, a manufacturing partner that's kind of world-class manufacturing really brings not only flexibility, but, increased competency, lower cost, and allows them to use their money more on what's focused as their core business. So I think to David's point, we're probably seeing more conversations. They've been accelerated over the last year because of a lot of things we just talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I'm kind of curious when you look at that and you look at the market shifts and you look what's been going on and how maybe catastrophic this looked at this time last year. Are you guys surprised how robust the EMS industry and your business has been over that period?
I'd be
Rob's
lying
smiling.
I'd be lying if I said I'm not surprised. I mean, we like every company, right? We were doing scenario planning a year ago when this all started coming together. A lot of uncertainty. We didn't, we honestly didn't know which direction things were going to go. How's this going to impact our business? How are we going to interface with our customers? What's going to happen in their end markets? So you do scenario planning, and I would say, this market has been more resilient probably than I thought it was going to be. In fact, it's probably, this is a very robust business for us right now. We see more conversations with more customers, whether it's, kind of what we were talking around flexibility and just the need to kind of support this volatile market. It's this reshoring topic, everything's going on there. It's everything around, the addition of IoT and intelligence and those kinds of things to devices. Customers are looking for better options for both engineering and manufacturing partners. We've seen this as being, an acceleration in conversations with customers rather than the opposite, which, to be honest, a year ago, I didn't think that was going to be the case.
Yeah. Hey, listen, with, I guess one of the issues too is, as a North American based EMS, with everything that's going on and our government now putting a lot of money out there to help stimulate everything. Is there anything that you expect out of the new administration from the political side that might be beneficial to the industry, or is there any initiatives there that you see as important? David, what do you think?
Yeah, let me go back and answer the last question first.
Okay.
We similar to Rob, we went through a lot of scenario planning last year. And at the end of Q1, we thought 2020 was definitely not going to be a growth year, right? We kind of looked at it by market segment and said, okay, military, aerospace, defense, if it's not related to commercial aircraft, it'll probably hold up quite well. Same thing with medical. We figured medical would hold up well. I think Rob hit a key point earlier. Anything that was elective in nature was being deferred, as hospital beds were being filled with COVID patients. So that one we were maybe a little bit surprised by. But we definitely expected our tech industrial customers to be hit pretty hard throughout 2020. We were surprised by a couple things, right? Customers that were able to repurpose their equipment to help fight the pandemic. We've got a customer who builds a commercial sprayer, a few small tweaks, next thing you know, it's being pulled into the market to spray disinfectants. We've got a customer that their product's tied to the fishing industry. All of a sudden, everybody's, quarantining at a local lake and pulling the demand for their product. I would have never guessed that, a global pandemic would drive an increase in fishing equipment. And then, I think one thing that you've used to tell people, Eric, during your consulting days was you got to have 3 legs to a stool, right? And us having, the 3 key market segments, medical, mil-aero, and tech industrial definitely help with that resiliency. And then on top of that, we're fortunate with our diversification of our customer base. We have no customer that's, greater than a single-digit percentage of the company's revenue. And so while you've got all the volatility of different markets, different customers, ups and downs, it helped balance out that we ended up having a very strong 2020. I'm probably more surprised at how robust 2021 is looking, and questioning how much of that demand is real and how much is that people trying to get in front of the supply chain. So,
okay. Thank you. Yeah, and sorry for jumping in there and halfway on the last one. So what do you think then, as far as from the administration perspective, what can the government doing or should they be doing?
Yeah. So, I think creation's been around 30 years. We've weathered a few different administrations. And so if we're going to drive efficiencies, if we're going to drive growth, if we're going to drive investment and fund that internally, we're going to rely on ourselves to do that. All right. I think there's a lot of focus on bringing manufacturing, back to North America. But for us to wait for somebody externally to help drive that for us, I think would be a foolish strategy. So I don't think we'll really focus on that as being part of our strategy for growth.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing that I think we would look at is anything going to change on the tariffs? Tariffs can come and go fairly quickly. But if you think about just manufacturing operations and supply chain, those things are hard to move. And so, we've certainly seen a push with some of the tariff changes over the last few years that have made this nearshoring initiative, it's driven a lot of conversations for us. And I don't see anything, or have not heard anything that indicates that that's going to change near term. I think that's going to be maintained as a policy that, I think will continue to drive interest from our customers on that front. All the other things that we're looking at that are drivers are going to continue to flourish. I think, if we talk about the markets where we're focused, we see just a huge move towards outsourcing. We see the value there being really strong. We see, this, especially in these markets that we're focused on, I see it as being, continued strength. And so even if tariffs swing a little bit one way or the other, which I have no indication that they will, it sounds like they're going to stay as they are. Even if they do swing, I think this momentum carries forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if the tariffs went away tomorrow, I think that momentum has already started. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of OEMs saying, okay, unless my market is in Asia or Europe, I don't see it going back and shifting to a massive offshoring back to China.
Yeah. Interestingly, with all that, positivity and potential growth going forward, the workforce, the talent acquisition question comes up. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on that because we have had a couple of questions in on that. Are you seeing that supply of a well-educated, talented workforce drying up, or is that something you're able to manage? And how are you doing that? How are you getting the next generation of the workforce ready to be EMS industry players?
At least I'll give you my perspective on it, Phil. I mean, we're in a growth mode now as a company. I think one of the interesting things is we're seeing a lot of people that without an EMS background that are being affected by changes in manufacturing strategies for a lot of our customers. There's a lot of really talented operations, supply chain, manufacturing people that we have a great opportunity for them in a company like Benchmark. So the experience they bring to the table from the OEM side, we find to be really valuable with us, and that's been it's a bit of a healthy change for us. It allows us to kind of maybe think about things a little bit differently, bring in talent from other parts of the market that might not otherwise be attracted to an EMS company. So both engineering and manufacturing talent, I think we've seen a lot of exciting new people, joining the company, and we hope that continues.
Yeah, I like that idea of recruiting from the OEM market as well. You know, being able to see both sides of the process is pretty important because it can feel very different from the two different sides. David, what about from your side?
Yeah, I think if you just focus on a talent pool of EMS professionals that have been around 15, 20 years, it's a shrinking pool, right?
Yeah.
For sure. So as Rob said, we've got to find, good quality leaders, good people in supply chain, good people in operations, good people in engineering from other industries, and then focus on, are we hiring the right people, right? If they're the right people, they adapt very quickly. So I think it's a combination of that and promoting from within, right? Creating that talent, taking your high potential people internally, continuing to invest in their training and development so that they can be the future leaders of the organization.
Excellent. Gentlemen, I'm aware that we have that we could probably go on for a while longer, but we better not. And respecting everybody's time, and mostly you gentlemen who've shared. So in closing, I'm just going to ask one last kind of quick question of each of you, and it's simply this: since we have a lot of supplier companies, who tune in and watch our stuff too, from that perspective, what is the one solution that you still need from the industry in order to improve your business, whether that be from the software, the machinery, the automation, what is maybe one solution that you still would like to receive from the supplier side of the house? And David, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would probably say two things. One, help us look around the corner, right? Our customers aren't expecting solutions today. They're expecting us to anticipate what the next problem is going to be and be a step ahead of that. So, that would be the first thing. Help us think, not just this quarter, next quarter, what's going to happen a couple quarters, a year, 2 years down the road. And then secondly, more on the component suppliers right now, meet your commitments, right? It is a unique time in the industry right now. Our customers look for our commitments because that is how they commit to their customers. And if we're not having those met all the way through the supply chain, it impacts everybody within the supply chain, their ability to service their customers, to generate revenue, and to maintain market share. So help us look around the corner and meet your commitments.
Very good.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think, the thing that I see changing in this industry is just the nature of the partnership we have with our customers. And so part of it is, if I had one wish, it would be, I'd like for our customers to embrace the idea of a partnership with a company like Benchmark as being the path forward. So I think this used to be a market where you kind of threw RFQs over the wall and you took, and you chose potential partners based on pricing. We see that changing. I mean, the customer relationships we have that are really valuable are the ones where we have a partnership, and we recognize that we have a roadmap of solutions we're going to be bringing to the market together, and we have, and so that partnership involves collaboration. To David's point, we need to understand. They need to help us understand their forecasted business and requirements, and they need to recognize that that's important, that we maintain a level of understanding there. But it's also, one where we're helping them in areas that they may not have thought, whether it's design and insights, cost improvements, ways to optimize manufacturing. Those are all things. So that idea of kind of a partnership versus a supplier vendor relationship, I think that's the trend that we're seeing with our most successful customers right now. And yeah. I would encourage other folks that are considering it to really look at it as a partnership.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think that works in both sides of the house as well. It's, it's both true from a customer point of view, but it's speaking to what David was saying, it's essential from a supplier point of view as well. Your CapEx guys need to be helping you with the vision of the smart factory. Your component guys need to be meeting their commitments and looking at how they can best match in with your demand and your forecast. So yeah, I think that idea of extreme collaboration rather than this just kind of jobbing idea of let's get the best price on this one, let's get an extra 0.1% out of our bill of materials every quarter. It's a much better strategy going forward.
Good. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for your time today. I'm sure the audience appreciates it. I know I certainly do. It's always good to talk to EMS companies since it kind of drives a lot of what happens in the industry. So, David, Rob, thank you so much for taking time today. I wish you guys both a prosperous and safe rest of 2021. And Phil, same to you, my friend. So
Thank you.
very good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.